Welcome back to Talking Dragon Age, the show where I talk about Dragon Age. Today we're discussing some plots that I would like to see expanded upon in the future. Some of these already have satisfying endings, so I'm comfortable with leaving them as is, though I would still be interested in seeing what happens next. Others do not have an ending and are still open-ended. Some of those Bioware has stated they will not continue, despite the fact that they already directly impact the state of Thedas, and do not have an ending. So let's start off here with one of my favorite duos that did come to a satisfying conclusion, but I would still like to see what happens next. Rhys and Evangeline. Dragon Age Asunder remains one of very, very few books I have intentionally read twice. I am a sucker for a good love story, and I adore Rhys and Evangeline. They have some war table stuff in Inquisition, and I'm glad to see they're still together. I want to see a healthy relationship portrayed in a video game. For some reason, fiction writers seem to struggle once characters get into a relationship. Rhys and Evangeline are both terrific characters who I would simply love to see more of in any capacity. Next up, I want to talk about the awakened Darkspawn. Now, I don't know if this was the intention, but the way I interpreted these different groups and factions is that the disciples were the ones loyal to the architect, and awakened was like a blanket term for all of them. I.e., all disciples are awakened, but not all awakened are disciples. So I'll just be saying awakened for the purposes of this video. Now in Dragon Age 2, Nathaniel mentions allies in the Deep Roads that are not dwarves. It stands to reason there are awakened Darkspawn still helping the Wardens, at least in some capacity. Whether they intentionally led Nathaniel into a trap by feeding them misinformation remains to be seen. Whether or not you agreed to work with the Architect or not, it makes sense that at least some of the Awakened are still willing to work with the Wardens as long as the Wardens are willing to work with them. I've talked about this before, but I like the Architect's messenger that comes to Amaranthine to warn the Warden about Vigil's Keep. I like having him fight with us to save Amaranthine, and then letting him go afterwards. In the epilogue, which has proven very untrustworthy, it's implied he becomes a sort of anonymous guardian that protects travelers along the roads, though he accidentally spreads the taint as he does so. So where are the rest of the surviving Awakened? It's important to remember that they are individuals. Some probably just wanted to keep causing trouble, some maybe went to continue to try to find the old gods, some may have worked with the Grey Wardens, some may have isolated themselves, probably in the Deep Roads somewhere. Like, maybe they went and tried to form their own kind of society. I think that would be awesome. I don't think Darkspawn need food, since the taint kind of sustains them. Though food may still have benefits, like energy or something, I don't know. But yeah, I think it would be really cool if some awakened Darkspawn isolated themselves and became kind of like monks, pondering the meaning of life, or meditating to reach enlightenment. It would make total sense. I'm reminded of the Geth from Mass Effect. They know why they were created, and they know what will happen to them after death. But they still ponder philosophy because now that they can think for themselves, they need to find their own reasons to exist. Awakened Darkspawn are quite similar.
Do these units have a soul?
So, yeah. Speaking of Origins DLC stuff, let's talk a little about the Harvester. Multiple Harvester heads apparently escaped Amgarak. The Harvester itself is just a really cool concept. Its only goal seems to be to add more corpses to itself. These things, or this thing, must be hiding somewhere. It must be doing something. It probably encountered Darkspawn, but would it even try to add their bodies to itself? If it did, it would probably be corrupted by the taint. Does that mean it would hear the calling and become like a ghoul? Or could it maybe separate itself from the blighted parts if that's started? If it's not infected, who knows what it's been doing or how many corpses it's consumed? The Harvester is such an awesome concept and I can't wait to see it again. One commenter brought up the idea that it may go to the Grand Necropolis in Navarra. Now that would be cool. That could make for a good DLC. The Mortalitasi notice a lot of their corpses in the lower levels going missing, so we have to go down there and find out what happened, where we encounter the Harvester that has grown enormous by this point. Two birds with one stone there. Explore the necropolis and get more of the Harvester. So next up is something I think a lot of people know about, but don't really think about returning. In the human noble origin, we meet Iona, a lady-in-waiting to Lady Landra. She tells us about her daughter Amathine. Then in the Denerim alienage, we see Amathine. And all she says is that her mother never came back from Highever. And it is the saddest thing, and it makes me want to cry, especially since you can't really talk to her at all. So imagine running into this girl again. This girl lost both her parents, was in the alienage during the riots and the plague, and the attempted slave grab, and the Darkspawn invasion, and then the rebuilding of everything afterwards. Now, I'm sure she would have been adopted into another person's home, the elves in the alienage are close-knit that way, but still, what this little girl endured. She would be in at least her mid-20s by the next game. So think about her coming back as maybe a Grey Warden, or a friend of Red Jenny, or anything. I'd just love to see this tiny little inconsequential character come back so we can see how she grew up. I don't know why, but it's always cool to meet characters as kids, never see them again until they're an adult, and just see the difference. I think it's because it reminds me that this is a world with its own things going on in the background of whatever our protagonist is doing. People grow up, things change, and we're not always there for it. That's one of the reasons I love video games. These are worlds to explore. It's kind of like when our companions from earlier games go on to positions of power in the future. For example, Alistair being king when he used to be just our goofy sidekick. Or Liliana becoming divine, or Sten becoming the Arashok. Or, in Mass Effect, Rex goes on to lead the Krogan race. Tali was just a kid on her pilgrimage and goes on to become an admiral. Garrus, failed CSEC officer turned vigilante who got the attention of the three biggest gangs in the Terminus systems, loses his team, and then becomes advisor to the whole damn Turian military. And so I think it's the same kind of thing seeing minor characters who we knew as kids grow up to be badasses. Similar to Amathine, in Dragon Age 2, there's that elven girl Leah who we save from the serial killer in Act 1 and who becomes a guard in Act 3. This is what I'm talking about. I wouldn't mind seeing her again either. Or I guess any of the guards from Kirkwall. Next up is something kind of touched on in Tevinter Nights. In Down Among the Dead Men, there's a city guard who doesn't realize he's dead. It's kind of explained, kind of theorized that a spirit inhabits his body and has access to all his memories and stuff, and I guess kind of... Well, our personalities are kind of contained in our brain. If a new, unbiased, undeveloped entity takes up residence in our now unoccupied brain, then it makes sense that they quickly become what we were. I hope I'm explaining that well, and I hope it didn't creep you out too much. That's just kind of my explanation for why the spirit takes on the guy's personality and memories. It's what makes sense to me. Well, anyway, this guy goes on to serve the Mortalitasi as a librarian, and that's kind of awesome. And maybe it's just me, but I thought there was a little flirtation going on between him and the Mortalitasi woman. In retrospect, knowing he's dead, it's really awkward. But in some weird way, I'm interested. I'd like to see these two get together in the future, and it makes me super uncomfortable. But that's not a bad thing. Throw weird things at me, make me uncomfortable. Dragon Age has a weird and great opportunity to explore and make people think about what it means to be alive, and how love can exist anywhere. And people, get your minds out of the gutter, because I didn't say anything about sex stuff. I was careful about that. Speaking of undead, it appears Navarra uses undead for servants. You might think slaves is a more accurate term, but I don't think the spirits are actually bound, since that apparently requires blood magic, or maybe a summoning circle, I don't know. Also, Dorian says Tevinter uses spirits as servants, but I don't think they're undead, and they certainly don't look perfectly human. I imagine these skeletal wraith guys carrying platters with wine glasses on them to a magister just lounging in a large chair and carrying on a conversation so nonchalantly. I think that sounds amazing. Dorian says the things they can be made to do are quite marvelous. I believe him. I want to see. Now, one of the coolest magical things they talk about, but we never actually get to see, is from Asunder. When the group is traveling back from Adamant, Ferriman proposes a theory or hypothesis about Cole and his abilities. It ends up being wrong, but he explains that some mages don't develop magic in a normal way. It's called Arcanist Derangement. Pharamond explained that the term was coined in the Tower's Age by a magister named Elenius. Elenius posited that magical talent is like a flowing river. Properly channeled, it finds its way to the ocean. In this metaphor, the river of magic finding its way to the ocean results in your average mage that can cast spells. But if left to its own devices, it might flow in a different and unexpected direction. But it will express itself somehow. Before the Circle, magical talent expressed itself in many ways, often guided by ancient tradition. These mages possessed magic no Circle mage could replicate. Their unpredictability was considered a threat. This is different than cultures like the Avar or Chastened, who have their own traditions regarding magic and thus develop their abilities in different ways. Arcanist Derangement is different magical powers altogether. Magister Elenius explains in his texts that their wild talents were not only unpredictable, but chaotic. He talks about them communing with spirits, being lured into darker paths, and that few lived long lives. Pharamond explains that although Magister Elenius wrote these texts, there's still a lot they don't know. He asserts that theories and assumptions can be wrong. Essentially, Magister Elenius is one individual who wrote about this stuff, but that doesn't make his findings the end-all be-all. He may have been wrong about some things, and there may be much more that he never discovered. In any event, I want to see some examples of this Arcanist Derangement. Stretch the limits of what we think is possible in Dragon Age. On the subject of magic, let's talk about some magic-using creatures. Tevinter Knights just barely mentioned some creatures in Tevinter that have been affected by the weak veil, and thus have developed some magical weirdness of their own. Dragons are said to have magic in their blood, but I still don't know if they can actually really be used for blood magic. Please answer that question. Though dragons also have fire glands, which I assumed is how they make the fire that they spit. Although in Last Flight, Isaiah talks about the archdemon's breath bearing no connection to the Fade. That seems a weird thing to note if normal dragons also don't connect to the Fade. So, yeah, I don't know. So, magical creatures of Tevinter are a big thing I want to see, but also ghasts. They only appear in the Mark of the Assassin DLC for Dragon Age 2, and I think they feel a little out of place in Dragon Age, but I think that's only because we haven't seen many other creatures like them. Meaning, I think they could feel more in place if they included more of them, or at least played on similar themes. Because the whole sections where they appear in Mark of the Assassin seem closer to high fantasy, or at least draw inspiration from high fantasy. Mixing in high fantasy with the dark fantasy of Dragon Age isn't necessarily a bad thing, as long as it's not overdone. I don't know how well I'm explaining this. Basically, I just want to see more of the ghasts. Like, maybe explain more of their mages, the Velgastrials. I'm just going to go ahead and read straight from the Codex for this. Although ghasts are cunning and able to cooperate for survival, they show no signs of true intelligence. They are unable to speak, communicating only through grunts and squeals. Occasionally, a pack of ghasts will include a strange creature known as the Velgastrial. Unlike the common ghast, the Velgastrial can wield magic. Some assume that they first learned by lurking around and watching other mages. Others believe that ghasts, like animals, are sensitive to the unseen forces that shape our world, and that the Velgastrial is able to utilize magic purely through instinct. It is unknown if Velgastrials risk possession when casting spells as other humanoid mages do. So yeah, I'm curious, what's up with these little guys? Can I keep one as a pet? Or maybe just make friends with one? I don't know. So anyway, I think that about does it for this episode. Again, these are just plots I would personally like to see return. Of course there are others, but these are the big ones I wanted to talk about. So that's it for now. Wait. Oh, you guys thought you had me, didn't you? You thought I forgot about the Warden, didn't you? That's just what you want. Well, I'm not falling for it, Bioware. Let's talk about the Warden. Whether or not the Warden died, an Orlesian Warden takes up command in Amaranthine. The least you could do is replace any future involvement that would involve the Warden with the Orlesian Warden Commander. That said, if the Warden did survive, they went looking for a cure for the calling/blight/taint, whatever. For some reason, that took them beyond Thedas to lands that have never known the Blight. Probably the homeland of the Voshai after their massive cataclysm, but I talk about that in my episode for Beyond Thedas. Well, if the Warden romanced Liliana, the Trespasser epilogue says the Warden has returned. The state of their mission is unknown, but it probably isn't complete yet. It stands to reason that even if the Warden didn't romance Liliana, they have still returned, because, well, why would their choice of love interest change how long it took them to finish their business in the West? Well, they had to have found something. Whether or not what they found has anything to do with the Blight is anyone's guess. So their quest may or may not affect the Wardens at large. But the Warden themselves is back in Thedas, and will have some role to play in the schism. Because why would they not? If they exist and are back in Thedas, there's literally no reasonable explanation for why they are not doing anything. Especially if, say, they romanced Alistair and became Queen of Ferelden, or married Anora and became king. Or if they romanced Alistair and he stayed a Warden and survived in the Fade. In that case, the Warden is definitely involved in Warden stuff. You can't just act like the Warden doesn't exist because he's not alive in some people's playthroughs. That has not stopped you before! Now, of course, there is a good opportunity here to not replace a dead Warden with the Orlesian Warden Commander, because that will make the choice much more meaningful. Also, about what I said about the epilogue, they are infamous for being retconned, so there is that. Regardless, if the Warden went on a quest to the west, something happened. Don't act like it didn't. Even if you retcon it in the dumbest way possible and say the Warden never returned, that's at least something. Maybe we'll go there at some point in the future and find out what happened to them. Regardless, if you just stop expanding the Warden's story here, that is the dumbest possible thing I can imagine you doing. Even if you say Morrigan was secretly a Skrull the whole time, and Alistair can suddenly shapeshift into an octopus with legs, that still wouldn't be as dumb as leaving the Warden's story where it is at the moment. That is a borderline How I Met Your Mother or Game of Thrones finale level of stupid. So yeah, I'll write it if you want, but it is such a disservice to fans of Origins if you don't finish the Warden's story. And I know you like to say, the Warden's story is over. No, it's not! What are you trying to gaslight me? You continued it in Inquisition! This is not a conclusion! This is not over! So anyway, that's it for now, guys. Thank you all so much for watching. Don't forget to comment and like, and remember, Tala, not us. Oh, wait. Dreamers and Fen'Harel. Next episode.